Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be talking about a subject that's really close to my heart, and it is freelancing for the BBC. So I've been a freelancer since 2018 and I started in June, so it's nearly 2 years. The way I got into it was I approached them for work experience. So there's an online form and they open up work experience about 3 or 4 times a year. But you don't hear back for about 3 months. I think I got a phone call from BBC Radio Scotland about 3 months after I'd signed up. I signed up in March and I think I got a phone call in May or early June, and I went in on June the 17th. So I did 2 weeks of work experience there. It's completely unpaid, unfortunately, which is a shame because you make quite good money at the BBC. It's about £100 a shift. So I lost out on about £1,000 roughly. But it was such a good doorway opening for me. It was an amazing gateway. What happened was, once I'd done the 2 weeks there, I got booked for more programs. So then after the 2 weeks, I started getting paid. And I think that's really common with work experience. Lots of people get their foot in the door with work experience. Sign up for work experience if you can. Think critically. I think they ask you about a program and how you could change it or what you liked about it. I'd recommend listening to whatever program it is you're interested in or the channel you want to work for and thinking about what could be improved, what you think is good about it already. And also they love talking about young people at the BBC. They always want to talk about what could we do to attract a younger audience, because most of their audience are 50 and a bit older. So they'll always ask you about a younger audience. So have a think and try not just to say really generic things like TikTok and Snapchat. I think those are quite overused and often the BBC doesn't really know how to use them. So I think unless you've got sort of 16-year-olds running the account, then don't do that. Unless you're really, really good at TikTok and Snapchat, and then obviously recommend them. Personally, I'm 26, so I'm not really that au fait with TikTok. So for me, I can't really recommend anyone uses it because I wouldn't really be that good at thinking of things to use it with. So I just recommend thinking about young people, think about what you like about the channel or program, what you would do differently. Those are probably the main questions you'll get asked, to be honest. Also just what you've done in the past, what your previous experience is. Those are the main things they'll look for from someone who's applying for work experience. And as I say, that comes up every 2 or probably 3 times a year. So I definitely recommend getting into work experience. I was really lucky. I started working for Radio Scotland, but I would recommend working for a regional BBC channel because they're much smaller and they're always going to use people, and they often make you do things before you're ready to do them. So for example, at BBC Radio Cumbria, I got made to read the sport. And I did say to the editor at the time, I don't know anything about the sport, how do I do this? But I ended up being taken off it really early because I was terrible at it. I was really, really bad. But I mean, that's the point. It's an amazing opportunity. So I'd really recommend getting in touch with regional radio because they'll give you way more opportunities. And as I say, before you're even ready sometimes. And I also actually run a programme for Radio Cumbria, so that's an amazing opportunity, and I wouldn't get that at Radio Scotland because it's too big. Big fish in a small pond, I really think that's a lot more worthwhile than being a small fish in a big pond. So definitely try regional news and ask them for work experience. My next tip is to email everyone. Now this is a little bit of an insider knowledge, but all BBC emails are name.surname@bbc.co.uk. So you can really easily find people. I mean, there's a slight difference. It depends. Some programs just use the first name. It might just be, for example, if I was a radio presenter, it might be just georgina@bbc.co.uk, or it might be georgina.davis01@bbc.co.uk if there's 2 Georginas or whatever. If you can, I'd recommend emailing producers because they're the people that book you. The presenters, they have nothing to do with it. They're not going to be the person that says, come and work for us, we'd love to have you on our team. That is the producer. They're the person that sets up the guests. They ring everyone, say, can you come on this show? They set it up. That person goes on the show. They also are probably the person that will say, we want this young thing working for us. So I'd recommend getting in touch with producers. It's not always the easiest to find out who they are, but if they're not someone that presents, There'll be a researcher, there'll be a producer, and lots of people you can obviously Google on LinkedIn and find out what exactly their position is within the BBC. Editors are obviously also really good, so if you can find out who the editor or the assistant editor is of a station, contact them. And always try and say, I liked that programme, this is my experience, can I come and work for you? You basically want to say, I like what you do, this is what I can add to it, can I come and work for you? Send links to videos you've made, like YouTube videos, say I'm really interested in media, I'd really like to get into journalism, would I be able to come and do some work experience with you? I think as well with emails, they're such a good way of getting in touch with people. For example, I was working in Radio Scotland and all my shifts seemed to have dried up from this work experience that I was saying about. So I got in touch with Radio Cumbria because one of my lecturers had mentioned them ages ago when I was working, and I got in touch saying, please can I come and work for you? I've worked for Radio Scotland before. So they said, yeah, sure, come down. And because I had already worked for Radio Scotland, they asked the editor at Radio Scotland what I was like, and they gave me a really good review. And then when I was working for Radio Cumbria, I was driving from Glasgow to Carlisle every day, and I kept going through Dumfries and Galloway, and I could hear their local bulletins. So I thought, goodness, there must be a station in Dumfries and Galloway. So then I sent Colin, who was reading the bulletin, an email saying, please can I come and work for you? And he said, actually I'm not in charge, it's Debbie, but here you go. And that's how I got to work for them. So emails have really got me where I am today and all my gigs, to be honest. You also have to be quite happy to travel really far. I travel quite often to Dumfries, and I also go to Carlisle quite a lot. So you have to be quite flexible. And I've also worked in Fife and also Stirling. So my full patch, as the journalists will say, is about 160 miles. So it was really far. I wouldn't recommend it if you're not a driver, and that's something I'd also recommend if you're wanting to be a journalist or even a freelance journalist, is to learn how to drive. You need a car and you need to learn how to drive. You can get away with it if you're lucky enough to have a job as a journalist and you don't need to travel very far, or you're an online journalist, but for the majority of jobs, you just need to be able to drive. It's really important, and lots of jobs actually ask that as an entry requirement, can you drive? So I'd recommend that as just a general life skill if you're wanting to become a freelancer for the BBC. The other way you can get into the BBC and become a freelancer is by going on the graduate trainee scheme. Now, this is something I have never been able to get onto. It's fiercely competitive, so I wouldn't really recommend it as a starting block. I think you should apply. Please do apply, because if you don't apply, you won't have any chance of getting in. At least you've got a microscopic chance of getting in if you do apply. But honestly, they get thousands and thousands and thousands of applications, and there's not very many places is the bottom line. There's maybe 50 places, and they really do get like tens of thousands of people applying. There's so many people applying that they could choose a completely different set of people and they would still be all amazing. I've written down the 3 pros and the 3 cons I think there are to being a freelancer for the BBC. So first, the pros. You get more flexible holidays. You can literally say no if someone offers you a shift and you don't want to work on that day. So it doesn't mean your holidays are confined to 35 days or 25 days. You literally can have unlimited holidays if you want, which is amazing. You get to decide when you work, which is lovely. You get flexibility. You can say, I never want to work weekends, or you can say, I only want to work weekends. You get a lot of flexibility. You can turn shifts down if you don't want them. The next one is difference every day. You can have a different job every day of the week if you want. I've had weeks where I'm reporting one day, I'm reading bulletins the next, I'm out getting vox pop, speaking to people on the streets. It's so varied. It's amazing. Like, what other job do you get that kind of variety? And you don't even get it when you're full-time. It is varied, but it's not as varied. Being a freelance journalist is amazing for variety. This is quite similar, it's different every day, but you get to meet different people, and this gives you such a good opportunity to connect with people, get well known in the industry, learn who people are, make new connections, and it also sets you up in a really good position to go for a job if you want a job in the future. When they advertise, you're in a perfect position to say, we've worked together before, this is great, amazing, you've got a job, But being a freelancer is great. You get to meet so many different people, and it also means that if you don't get on with someone very well, you don't have to see them very much. You can see them once a month, or you can just decide not to work with them at all. And it also means you get to see people not too often, and actually it's really nice because it means that you always come across really interesting because you've got a lot to catch up on. You get better chat if you work freelance. Now, the cons. So there's lots of driving and petrol money. I drive between Dumfries, Carlisle, Glasgow, Stirling, Kirkcaldy, so it's just really expensive. It can be really, really pricey. If I go to Carlisle, it's about 100 miles a day, but both ways, so about 200 miles, and that will cost me about 40 quid every 2 days. So that's really, really expensive. It means that I end up spending about £100 just on petrol in a week if I go to Carlisle for a whole week. Oh, doesn't bear thinking about. The next one is there's much less stable work. You have to be quite mentally strong to be a freelancer for the BBC because you just don't know where your next shift is coming from. So although, as I said before, a pro of being freelance is that you get more holidays, you're also in a much more unstable position. You don't know where the next shift's coming from. So sometimes even though you're not working, it's not a holiday, you're looking for your next piece of work and you're stressing about it sometimes, particularly when you start off. When I was quite new to freelancing, it was so stressful. I was just always thinking, well, no money for Georgina this month then, like what do I do? No money! Next up is less work efficiency. Imagine if you worked in the same place 5 days a week. You'd be really good at your job because you do the same thing every day. You use the same systems every day. Now imagine if you worked in that place once a month. You'd come back, you'd be a bit rusty. You'd think, how do I use this program? How do I use that program? You maybe need to ask. So you're basically a lot less efficient as a worker, and it doesn't reflect very well. It makes you look a bit useless because you've done that job many, many times before, but it might also not be very often. So you're just much less efficient at your job. So make your choice. I hope you have luck with these suggestions, and please let me know if you do decide to be a freelance journalist, how you get on. I'd love to speak to other people who are trying to do the same, trying to build a career in being a freelance journalist. So comment below and subscribe for more notifications, and also let me know if you want any more videos on being a freelance journalist or any vlogs or take me to work type of videos. It would be great to hear from you. Thanks very much. Bye.